Hello, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, and welcome to this IriusRisk Community Edition webinar with time zones to suit Europe specifically, but I'm sure we might have people from further afield. My name is Ryan Thornton. And as I am Director of Marketing, it is an absolute pleasure and a contractual obligation for me to welcome you all here. I am aided and abetted by Ms. Allen Addy, first name Claire, who is our head of product marketing, who will be doing all the important stuff when the other marketing guy shuts up. Welcome, Claire.
Nearly missed the cue. Thank you very much. That's a very generous introduction, Ryan. Happy to be here.
Compare without compare. And here we go. So, as night follows day, the first slide is followed by our agenda. Couple of little housekeepings. There will be a Q&A session at the end, so pop your Q&As into any questions into that Q&A panel on there. Secondly, before I get anybody in that Q&A panel or indeed the chat panel asking me, will this be recorded? Will we get a copy? Yes, indeed. This webinar will be recorded and winging its way to you around about 24 hours time from now. What are we covering today? Well, we're going to be looking at finding your way around IriusRisk, and we're going to create a diagram. There's a few different ways in which we can do that, and we'll lead you through each of those. And I say we, I mean the much more technical. Claire will lead you through those. Again, going on to the threats and countermeasures, looking at recent and upcoming advancements before giving you some more resources, starting with our free certification courses, furthermore, resources with blogs, other webinars, etc. And then finally, having a look about when you're doing this in the SDLC and how we can fit in, maybe not necessarily with the community edition, perhaps with the enterprise edition, but we do have both the community and the enterprise editions for you. And we have been funded by the European Union for this community edition, the European Cybersecurity Competence Centre, which is easy for anybody to say, have looked at shifting security left and seen that secure by design is something that is absolutely necessary and is a way in which the Union will move forward. And so have funded partly the community edition together with IriusRisk to ensure that everybody can have shifted cyber security. I nearly did a really bad stumble on that word then. Which brings us to our next slide. So, IriusRisk, the community edition. If you've not signed up already, you can do on the website. It's a free lifetime subscription. You get 3 threat models. That's 1, 2, 3. You're able to collaborate with other community edition users. A nice little button in the top right-hand corner where you can invite other users so that you can, turn your collaboration up to 11. You can export, your threat models after all, into, an XML file. We use, and you'll see this very shortly, draw.io. So it's familiar, and if it's not familiar, it soon becomes familiar. You're able to get, what gets reported gets done, and we're able to provide you with technical and compliance reports. You get all the updates. One of them happened just on Monday, 2 days ago, and access to not only this monthly 101 session, but other resources as well. We have over 14,000 active users. And then this is the final slide, I believe, from me. And then we can actually get into the stuff you really want rather than marketing talking about value propositions. But fundamentally, release secure software faster. Shift left, I know it's an oft used term, but it really is. Let's understand the security risks before we start building so that we can direct our pen testing or, ensure that the pen testing doesn't come up. And we are a security company, so I do need to always keep everything updated. We are secure by design. It's very scalable, automated threat modeling. Automated's in the name, which generally means scalable. Uh, the secret sauce, the magic, is the contextual rules engine, and it really aids with compliance as a standard. And equally, if we want to go beyond the community edition, we have flexible licensing, which, before an ado is in any way furthered, I am going to stop sharing my screen and pop you over to Claire and giving you the good stuff. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Ryan. Can you see my screen okay?
It is a glorious sight, and I can see.
Thank you. And I'm glad you said good evening at the start because although we picked, 11 a.m. UK, 12 o'clock for rest of Europe pretty much, we have got a couple of people from Australia. So thank you to those if you're here already for staying up so late to join us. It's really appreciated.
Well, then
And
I should have said hello and good day, I
good
think.
day. Definitely. And as always, we usually say at the start of these what companies are joining us because it does differ each time, which is great. When we did one a couple of months ago, it was predominantly manufacturing, medical device companies. And then last month, there were insurance, IT, communications. And then this month, I've got a list here. So we've got comms and IT, an investment platform, some consulting firms, one government agency, some more medical device manufacturers, some retail orgs, manufacturing, and then banking and even a credit regulator. And a couple of job titles that I saw. So obviously community, sometimes people don't share that, which is absolutely fine, but a couple did. So there were some CISOs and quite a few security architects. So again, we just like to share that so that you know what types of companies are using IriusRisk. In case you think it's just one industry or one role type, that's certainly not the case. So let's get cracking with this community edition webinar. To begin with, you may have heard of the Adam Showstack 4-question framework. If you haven't, I'll take a few seconds to explain what that is. It's a methodology, a framework that Adam created, and the 4 questions are: what are we working on? What can go wrong? What are we going to do about it? And did we do a good job? And essentially, it's kind of having those points of assessment throughout what it is that you're building, what it is that you're working on. And essentially, this is helpful because it's how IriusRisk is also structured. So we'll keep referring back to those 4 questions during this session to make it useful. Just before we begin, in case any of you are wondering if what the differences are between community and enterprise, in terms of the UX, the UI, the look and feel, the experience, it is exactly the same. They are the same product. There are just a couple of limitations on community, such as integration. So you can't integrate with your issue tracker, for example. You can't create custom workflows, but you can do everything else. And the draw.io interface that Ryan mentioned, of course, which is very familiar, especially if you've used other diagramming tools, maybe Lucidchart, Miro and such. So yeah, the product itself and the rules engine behind that is exactly the same. Now, what are we working on? We are going to create a threat model with AI. If you haven't yet heard of Jeff, this is our helpful AI assistant. And here's one I started earlier just to save about 30 seconds of you all watching my screen. If you're wondering why Jeff is represented with a pig, that is because 1 in 3 little pigs threat model. And if you're unsure which one that is, that's the one with the bricks, obviously, that didn't come a cropper to the wolf in the children's story. So when you model with AI, if you're unsure where to start, there are a couple of examples here that you can choose. So I've selected the code for the banking app. So you'll see it's here, that's been pasted in. And then Jeff is starting to create the components that may create the foundation, the setup for this code that's been pasted in. I've then asked Jeff to proceed. and it's now starting to map to real life components that are in IriusRisk. So I just need to tell Jeff to keep going. And then it's obviously in the background working out, oh, what is it that we're creating here? How can I align that within IriusRisk? And then what it will do is it actually creates a clickable diagram that in a moment we will click on and it will take us into a new diagram in IriusRisk. Pretty cool.
Yeah, and I think the important thing here, Claire, is it's not building a threat model out of sticks and straw. Uh,
It's
it's
not.
it's a bricks thing, and is it lightning fast in terms of being Usain Bolt speed? Not yet. However, is it much faster than you would be able to create this, from scratch? Absolutely. And I'm sure you're going to now the fact that it's your threat model and you can change and modify, but it does accelerate, doesn't it?
It really does. So, it essentially is there to augment what you're doing. We often use an analogy to say it's jumping you a few steps forward to something you are already going to build, something that you already need to assess for threats. And instead of having to start from scratch, although you can, of course, you've got everything over here, it just gets you those few jumps forward. Even if perhaps after this has been created, you're thinking, okay, that's 60, 70% of what I need, and I now need to annotate this further by adding in data flows, for example. Why is it doing that? Oh, something going awry here. Bear with me a second. There we go. So yes, you can just annotate this further as required, basically. And if you need more components, then you can search up here, drag those in. We can just do a quick example, literally as easy as that. And if you don't need it, you'll delete it out. So here is the diagram that Jeff has supported us to create based on the code for a banking application. It does give quite a random name. You can change this, you'll be pleased to know. Just go into project details. Just going to add that in so I know what that's about later. And so in terms of annotating further, we're starting to put in, okay, well, the JWT handler is communicating with the password handler, and then perhaps that's then going to go down to the user profile. And what you can do is you can right click on these and edit the data flow details, add in your tags to show what else you're doing to increase the security and save. You can also add your own. This came up in a previous one, like so. Obviously, have something more meaningful than that. And then you can actually see in here, let's move that across a little bit so you can see the annotation is visible on your diagram, which is quite helpful. So you can see where you've done that and perhaps where you haven't. Let's make that a little bigger. And then you can also go a step further, so we can right click here and complete a questionnaire. So this is based upon if you have further context, then of course you may want to go ahead and do this. And as you answer these questions, then it may change the subsequent ones accordingly. And then you can jump across to the other categories as well. Let's say this one's implemented, because then I'll show you what that looks like. We'll just answer a couple for now. But equally, if you don't have that information, the person creating this does seem to vary. And for very large organizations where they've got a very mature threat modeling process, this might be the development team. And so they aren't security experts, nor should they be. And so they perhaps may not have that context. Whereas if maybe there's a security architect working on this, then perhaps they will. So yeah, just to mention, if you don't have that context, that's fine, but there are other options available to you here. And then just remember to update your threat model, and then the rules engine will generate your threats and countermeasures, which we will go and take a look at in just a moment. Okay, so just checking my list here. Oh, and actually, just to mention, you'll notice this box at the moment. This is a trust zone. And on the left, if I just expand that, you can see, oh, there's also custom ones because a couple of us use this instance. But if I hover over, you'll notice there are trust ratings. So obviously, internet naturally has a very low trust rating. It's a dangerous place. Whereas perhaps you have a private cloud or even private secured would be, very trusted. Maybe a trusted partner would have a higher trust rating. Now, the feedback that we've received in particular from community users is that when you are new to threat modeling or perhaps have a lower maturity, You may not yet know which trust boundaries, which trust zones that you're going to need or use. So just wanted to flag that from the next release, which is in about 1 to 2 weeks' time, you will no longer be enforced to use a trust zone. So if for you that makes adoption easier, it's going to make the use of this better for you. You don't have to do that anymore. And I'm just going to demonstrate. Let me grab an AWS component. So that's not in a trust zone. At the moment, it says, oh no, oops, you've not added this in a trust zone. You need to do that. Otherwise, we can't update the threat model. That will no longer happen. Later on, if you wish, if again you get perhaps more experienced or you get greater context of what it is that you're working on, you can add that in later. This isn't going to disappear. It's just that you won't be enforced to use it, which we felt was worth a mention. If I jump back, come out of Jeff. So this is back in community. I've got a couple in here that I've already started, but if we go to a new project, and this can be a from scratch example. Let's call it from scratch. Maybe it's obvious how to create from scratch, but in case it isn't, just from that left-hand panel, just wanted to quickly show you what the options are, and then we will go into how to use a template. Now, as I mentioned on the left, you can expand your options, drag in as required, but you don't want to expand. You can just use, work smarter, not harder, I say. And you can just drag in whatever it is that you may need. Let's get a login and then there we go. So literally easy as that, move them around. And you saw, obviously, as you hover over the component, you see the arrows. That would be how you then create your data flows, your connections in between. That would be how you add in what's going on. Is it one way? Is it bidirectional? So on and so forth. As I said, very easy to then delete out. And depending, excuse me. Excuse me, just got a tickle there. So yeah, this is very, very straightforward to use, to arrange, to drag and drop, annotate accordingly, so on and so forth. Obviously, you can't integrate with issue trackers on this one. I think it comes up to say, yeah, you can't do that. But yeah, just wanted to show you how easy it is to do that. And then in terms of templates, here's one I also began earlier. There we go. And now I'll show you how to navigate to this in just a moment. But the thing that I love about our templates that we've predefined and uploaded into community, I believe there's about 50 at the moment. They also come with this guidance. So this is an example for an AI analytics platform, but it tells you what to do in a couple of tips. And obviously it kind of says this on the diagram itself. It's already got some data flows and connections in here. So again, it's just getting you further ahead. If you're already going to work on something like this, then it might save you a couple of hours work. If you go to IriusRisk import template, these are some that are in there at the moment. So perhaps you're an AWS user, you'd be able to import that. Literally just click this button. If I do that now, it will overlay on here, so I don't want to do that. We've got e-commerce. I mean, you can search GCP, and then literally that will just import as I have done here, which is really useful. Let me just check there's nothing else I wanted. Oh, and actually, if say you've created something like this, Ryan mentioned about collaborating with others, you can. It's very easy to do so. You can either copy the project link here. You can see that little green tick, or hopefully you just spotted it. That means that it's copied. Or, where's it gone? Let's go back in here. Where's my invite users? My internet, come on. There we go. So you can either copy the link for a specific project and then they can go in and collaborate with you, or you can click invite users and enter their email. Either way, if they're already a community edition user, then they'll just get notified and they can access straight away either community in general or that specific project. or if they haven't, if they're a new user, then they will literally be prompted to sign up, which will literally take, as you know, if you've done it yourself, about 30 seconds. And just to remind, as Ryan said, you get 3 free threat models. You have to really concentrate to say that one. So like if I try to create one now, it's obviously telling me that I can't do so, but it's very easy to go and delete a project if you no longer need it. Like so. Okay, I think that was everything. Yep. So now so we've done the first question. What exactly are we working on? Now let's take a look at the second question, which is what can go wrong? And this is where we go and take a look at the threats and countermeasures tab, the threats in particular. Let's just drag this across. This little quirk was added in a couple of releases ago. It's quite handy. So then you can just go in and focus on here. Now, it's identified 36 threats, which of course our diagram is relatively small in comparison. So of course, if you've got something more complex, then you're going to have a lot more, and there are some things that you can do to make this more manageable. But just to show you, if we expand some of these, you've got all of the components and use cases on here. And then also what we've begun doing with V2 components, this has been several months of work to basically add in newer risk patterns. These are also getting mapped to Stride, which is a threat modeling methodology, which, if you're not familiar, stands for spoofing, tampering, repudiation, information disclosure, denial of service, and elevation of privilege. So you'll notice that we're starting to map threats against those. There's one here that says it's a high risk. Let's just take a look at the details. Now it will tell you the level of risk in the top left. It will give you a description, impacts, potential scenarios. It also maps to CWEs. I know they're quite common, that people like to take a look at the weaknesses that are involved as well, which we'll also cover in the countermeasures in a second. It also says currently the risk is exposed, which is, all of them will say this because of course we've not taken any actions as yet. You could accept the risk, again, if you have additional information and that is necessary, or you can perhaps say, oh, this is out of scope, let's mark it not applicable. Out of scope, do that for now. Yeah, so that will be reflected in the details in a second. Some other information, yet the source, it's always going to be the rules engine. You can add expiry dates. This also maps to Stride LM. The LM is lateral movement. So you'll see the list. There we go. If relevant, then those will be in here. And then in terms of also mapping to MITRE, which also has obviously common methodologies and frameworks, we've got MITRE ATT&CK and MITRE ATLAS in here. You see it's identified 3 of those that are relevant. And then part of what the rules engine does is it also calculates the impact using CIA, which again, you may be familiar with already, as well as the risk summary, where we calculate the inherent, current, and projected risk. And what we'll do, just to save time, if you want to know more about how we calculate this and some examples of our risk calculations, we've got a couple of really useful blogs and articles. So what we'll do is when we send the email with this recording, we'll make sure that we include those as well, because you might have some questions of, how do we decide that the confidentiality is low for this example, but high for something else? We have got all of that documented. And then finally, I will stop for questions in a moment. If you've done any testing, obviously we haven't for now, you can reflect that in your threats and also your countermeasures. You can delete threats. Personally, would advise against it just in terms of audit trail. It may be better to put them as accepted, rejected, not applicable. So at least, and if you look back in 6 months' time, when maybe your product has changed or you feel the threat landscape has changed, you might have forgotten that you deleted a threat. So at least then you'd have a full record of everything that has happened. I'm just going to pause for a second. Ryan, are there any questions at this point, or shall I continue?
There's a couple.
Oh,
Another one coming as well. So, um, first question. Is
yep.
there a limit to the number of people you can invite?
That is not as straightforward. Yes and no. So no, you could invite 20 people if you wanted, not a problem. The restriction is when they open your threat model, your Jeff generated one, for example, that will use one of their 3 free threat models. So if they've already got 3, obviously they won't be able to view yours. They'd have to remove one that they've already got. So there's a restriction in the number of threat models, but not the number of users. I hope that makes sense.
Does. I just said in the chat that there wasn't a restriction, but that's much better information. Um, Secondly, two-factor authentication in the community edition. Is that available?
That is a good question. It's one of those things when you use something every day.
I
I
do know.
think I've bypassed this in my brain. You know the answer, do you?
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Right. So
Thank you.
because I asked somebody else in the meantime. No, it's something we would, we've got single sign-on and two-factor, but they're enterprise
Yeah.
capabilities. And, yeah,
Mm.
it makes sense because we have to push people to that way.
Yeah.
Um, then fine. Selecting not applicable, does it bring
Mm.
the score down?
Um, Now that depends. It may do, yes, because by marking not applicable, you're removing that calculated threat. Obviously, if it's one that's very low, you might not even notice. So if I go, we are going to look at the dashboard later, but it's not like you see this risk score 75.54. If you're marking something that's low or very low as not applicable, this is barely going to move, especially if maybe you've got 200 threats as a result, whereas we've only got 35. If you're marking one as not applicable that's very high, of course, before you've taken that action, the rules engine has deemed that your threat model has a risk of this percentage. So by taking that out, it is going to reduce slightly. But the reason I hesitated to respond is obviously don't misplace that reduction that you've kind of uh, taken action from a security perspective. Of course, you haven't. You said, okay, this isn't applicable in this scenario or for this threat model, which is fine. But obviously, we would still urge you to go and take actions that are implementations as well to reduce the overall risk. I hope again that makes sense. Is that all of them? You've gone on mute, so I assume that's all. Yeah.
Got one last
Oh,
one.
one more.
So beyond sharing them, actually, you can share the projects so that people can see them. But then, can anybody else that you've not shared this with, the threat model with, see the threat model?
No, no, because that is obviously that's yours, where they would need your password, they'd need all of your credentials to get into your community edition. So no one will have visibility of that unless either you've shared the link with someone else, then it will show as one of their threat models in their list of 3. Um, or if you've saved that threat model as a template, because those templates I shared, community edition users can also save their own if they've worked on something, and those can be uploaded. I think they might go through a very short approval process at IriusRisk, but yeah, if you were to do that, then of course people would see what you've worked on. But that's a good thing because it's something that obviously you're very proud of. So yeah, those are the only circumstances. Right. Okay, if no further, I will carry on. So we were here, weren't we? I think I'd picked these. Okay, so we've had a look at the threat detail, and then perhaps you're looking at this thinking, oh my goodness, I'm a team of one. I'm in a small organization. How am I going to get through all of these? What you can do is you can filter these further, whether you want to do that by components, by use case, the level of risk. Obviously, this is a common place to start. The type of risk mitigation. I mean, countermeasure progress, obviously, we haven't done a great deal as yet. Based on test results, there's all sorts. But if we start with the ones that are just critical, obviously it was 36 to begin with. I think this might be me, Just going to refresh. All right. Let's do that again. Current risk critical. Yeah, sorry about that. Right, so now it's identified 13 out of 36. And if you wanted to view them all together, you can flatten the view and then you'll just be able to scroll through, scroll down. So all of these are deemed critical. And probably that's a better place to start, in terms of taking actions rather than 36. So yeah, those are just a couple of options you can do. You can search. You can also add your own threats. So I know we mentioned there's some restrictions in community, but there are a couple of customizations that are available, and this is one of them. So you could create a generic threat, or it could be component specific. So maybe there's a particular one, a logout function, there's a threat that you know that's relevant within your industry or your particular security world. You can add that. Obviously, it just prompts you here to enter all of the details, and then it would be down to you, because obviously this hasn't been generated by our rules engine. You would have to say in terms of the impacts, whether it was a high, medium, low, and so on. And then if you wish, you can also add whether it links to the MITRE or STRIDE references. So yeah, it's just quite helpful because we appreciate there's not a one size fits all. And even though the rules engine is really comprehensive, that there will be examples where you need to add something else where you've got your own nuances and so on. Okay, so we've looked at what are we working on. We've looked at what can go wrong. And then what we're going to do now is the third question, which is what are we going to do about it? And this is where we start looking at the countermeasures, which are essentially security controls. This is where you're going to see what mitigations can happen. To start with, you might be wondering what the statuses mean. It's obviously rejected, quite self-explanatory, I would hope. Not applicable. We've got one in there that obviously we marked as NA earlier. Recommended are ones that are literally, we recommend that you look at this. They're not completely imperative, but we recommend that you start here. Required is the one to pay attention to. This is the category where it's like you need to take action here. These are really important based upon the risk level or your use case and so on. And then, of course, implemented is once you've actually taken actions. Because we didn't complete much of a questionnaire and obviously didn't add a great deal of context, that's why we haven't got any in required. So, no fear, don't panic. What we can do is pick from our list of standards here, and then this will essentially give us some guidance of where to go next. So which one should we choose? Let's go with the secure software development framework. Oh, okay, so this has given us one that would be non-compliant if this is one that is of importance to your organization. So I'm just going to shift that. Oh, all right, I'm not going to shift that. Let's do it here. Why? Wouldn't be a true webinar if something didn't go awry. Just going to refresh, try again. Not applicable. Required. There we go. Okay. These things just there to test you, aren't they? Right, so we've now got one that is in the required state. And then let's say you also, I'm trying to think of one that might bring a lot back. Let's go OWASP. Right, we've got 16 there. So instead we could tick them individually, but we can also do the whole group. Oh, or not. Anyway, you get the gist. So instead of having to go through realms and realms of information where you're unsure where to start, you can, take a look from a compliance perspective. You can also, similarly to what we did on the threats, go through and go, okay, again, I want to look at the ones that are very high. So there's 26, and you can move those up into the required. I have one more go because just want to. Okay. So we've got a couple up there, and then to remove your filters, you literally just click on the X, and then you can bulk edit to move things across and so on. Now I'm actually going to just mark one as implemented if it's going to let me.
I do have a question that's pertaining to what you've just shown, Claire.
Yeah, come.
And I don't know the answer to this, as it stands with the community edition. 'Cause obviously, it's a little bit always there's much more customization in the enterprise edition. But the question
Yeah.
is, so we have the like standard compliance, which is basically everything that
Yes.
you're not filtering it by anything. And then we have OWASP or CIS. Is there a way to apply both of them?
You can't at the same time.
Hmm.
So like you saw, I did the first standard, which was it? NIST, Secure Software Development Framework. So you can do them one at a time. So maybe there's three that are relevant to you. Obviously, I selected two. Let's pick this one, see if there's any. Right, not a good example. So there's none that would mean non-compliant. So there's 23 here. So you could do it one by one. And then again, you might decide, okay, let's say there's 20 out of 50 that are non-compliant. You would just do the action that I have, change these to required. You require these countermeasures, and then they are all going to jump up into this required section. And so essentially, in terms of mitigating, you can ignore all the other statuses and just take your action within that group. There's just not a way to say, oh, select these three at once. You have to do them one at a time because usually there's not a lot that a company would follow. There would be a couple. So it's not very time consuming anyway.
And so I suppose the way like my silly little mind's looking at it is when you click on that drop down with the standard compliance,
Mhm.
that's allowing you to view those, but
The
actually you
options.
need to then take action to make it not a view but an action, and you can take actions on as many views as you like.
Exactly.
And
Yes.
again, forgive my silly brain and lack of terminology.
No, no, it's good because people might be watching and wondering that. So thank you. So you can literally just scroll down to browse, and then it's only when you click on one that it will tell you if there are any that are non-compliant. And even if that happens, you might think, yeah, but I don't want to make those required. I'm happy to leave them in recommended, and that's fine as well. And then once you've clicked that X, it goes back to the default, which is no compliance has been selected. So hopefully that's clear. But if people have questions, very welcome. Let us know. Obviously, I've added one as implemented. So this little progress bar, it's saying that we are making some progress, which is great. What else have I got on my list? Ah, yes, of course. Now, this is grouped by status at the moment, but you can also group by weakness. So these are your CWEs, which, as I said earlier, are quite common for people to, go and take action on their common weaknesses. And again, you can do the same thing. So you've got 51, but you haven't got time or resource to be able to take action on them all. So from that 51, that you've got 25. Okay, so half of those are going to need some action. And then same thing, you just expand them out. You click to see additional information. And it is the same whether you're looking at the status or the common weaknesses. So just some information that gets captured in here, obviously similarly to threats. And then you've also got standard references. These are all clickable. So this is basically to give you additional information and greater context to what you're doing. Obviously, we haven't implemented anything yet. We haven't carried out any tests. But if we did, this is where you would see that or add that. References. So this is related to CWE 1041. You can add additional links as well. And then history. Yeah, obviously, we haven't done a great deal in this threat model as yet. So we don't have anything in the history. But that is where you'll find all of that information. And you can add your own as well. And then on the right-hand side, appreciate the view is very similar to threats intentionally, but the information is a little different. So scope, for example, this is to help you with who might end up mitigating this. So we've got the AppSec team, it might be the data or your operational team. We've got some baselines in here. Again, the MITRE references. And then testing, you can manually add this in. So let's say you partially tested on OWASP ZAP. Um, you can save that as well. Don't know why it's doing this to me today. But you can add your testing results as well. And all of that ends up filtering back into, when you go to your home dashboard, you will see those test results reflected here. So whether they failed, they passed, and so on and so forth. Let me just check. Okay, I think we've covered everything that I wanted for what are we going to do about it. Just checking my list. Yep. So essentially this view now is where we go to the final Adam Showstack questions, which is, did we do a good job? And in here, you can go and see, I think the risk score was about 76, almost 77%, wasn't it? And we've only done a couple of actions, but it has still come down a few percent. Again, depending on your organization, what it is, that is your product, what it is that your desired outcomes are, you may have a risk score that you deem acceptable of 65%, let's say. And looking at this, you see that there's still work to be done. So you need to go back in and look further. You always will have a snapshot of the diagram at the top, so you know which dashboard it is you're looking at. We've also got your threat risk distribution. So again, going back to the inherent, projected, and your current risk. We will share those details for those articles later on. And then, yeah, we've got some critical, very high threats, high, medium, low, the countermeasure states. So again, as you implement more of these, or perhaps you mark some as rejected, all of this will be captured. All of it is tracked, which is not only helpful for you, but if you're working in a team and someone's taking over from you, then of course they get an idea from this view of everything that's happened so far. And it's helpful if you've got a compliance and/or audit team. And speaking of audits. Let's go back to, so there's also a main dashboard for all of your projects. So if you have 3, it kind of looks at them all together. It will give you an overall risk across those models as it's doing now. So obviously there's one with 71-ish% and one with 77. So it's saying the average risk is 74%. And it will tell you which ones have the highest risk. It gives you additional information, such as your top 10 countermeasures of the highest impact. Then you can expand further here. And again, so you might think, well, okay, this is going to reduce the risk by 2.2%. I'm going to go in and do that because it's going to lower this overall. And then just while that's loading, we'll continue down. Your countermeasure status. So again, instead of just looking at the project level, this is everything all together. Perhaps you need to report that back to another department. You need to show what's happened for your 3 products that you're responsible for example. And then over time, as you're implementing those security controls, it will be tracked. Of course, we've only taken action today. So that's there as well. And then finally, yeah, you've got your standards coverage. So you can see this little tiny progress bar for the OWASP ASVS level 3. We've implemented 1 against that standard. But again, if you wanted to ensure you're getting coverage on others, then you can expand these and see which ones have necessary actions to be taken there. Being a bit slow today. Right, and then finally, reason I said auditing is at the bottom. It says, are you looking for the audit log? And yes, I am. Everything that has happened, appreciate it may seem a lot. I mean, we've got pages because, of course, I've been a community user for some time. So there's a lot in here. But again, if you need to see a specific event, like how many projects were created or when was it updated, and so on, you can search over here. You can change, the sort. So there are other actions in here. And again, if you need that audit trail, it's just helpful to know that it is there. And I believe that is everything I wanted to cover. Just looking down my list now. Nope, not missed anything. So with that, do we have any questions?
No further ones, though. I think we've had quite a lot coming through. Though, please feel free to put something in the question and answer panel if you do have any more.
Yeah.
But I think the bell has potentially tolled on any questions. So it just leaves for me to say, because that was a very in-depth webinar. We do have free self-paced online training,
Stop
which
sharing.
you can find from our website. There we go. I did that quick enough that nobody noticed. I was worried about that. So there's lots of different certifications, and we're constantly updating them. But there's three at the moment that that's going to increase very shortly. They have, a good introduction to both threat modeling and to IriusRisk. We do have a couple of questions in as well. On the website, we've got further reading and resources. And just to kind of let you bridges towards the SDLC. Of course, you can use the community edition within the SDLC, but the enterprise is geared towards enterprises and therefore has those features that make it easier to bring it into the SDLC. And it's just to show here that while you are, yes, shifting your security left, thinking about it earlier and making sure you build secure software from the outset, it does have a knock-on effect, which is positive to ROI, or ROSE is I think a better way of looking at it across the SDLC. It's better to build something right from the outset rather than have to fix it following a lot of pen testing. So I will have a look at these questions. So we got it's more of a statement. Interested to see if we can find out if we can implement Arius into a build pipeline. I suppose I know the answer. I'm going to pretend to be clever. Yeah, so we've got Jira integration, which is not necessarily your build pipeline, but it is one route into it, and it's two-way. And we equally have CI/CD integrations, which will be more directly applicable to what you're saying here. But it will be up to you how you would do that. But it's I would say it's worth getting in contact and having a discussion. Wonderful. And then we've got a couple more. No, we've not. We've got Claire being absolutely on the ball and writing into the chat, which I thought was somebody asking a question, which means it's good night from me.
A good night from him.
There we go.
No, thank you all very much.
Thank you. You take care. Ciao, ciao.
Bye.